So welcome everyone to today's webinar on Southwest Minnesota Arts Council's Equipment and Facilities Improvement Grants for fiscal year 2021, which for us runs from July 1st, 2020 through June 30th, 2021. I am Carolyn Koska, the Financial and Grants Administrator here at Southwest Minnesota Arts Council. First, I'll just run down what we're going to talk about today. We'll start with an overview of our organization. We'll look at the guidelines for this grant program. Then we'll go over to our website, show you what resources are there for you. Then we'll go into our grant system and walk through the application for this program so you know what to expect. And we'll finish up talking about the grant process. In other words, what happens after you have submitted your application. I do see that everyone is muted now. If you have some questions as we're going along, you can type them into that chat window, or we'll also stop a couple times. And then finally at the end, I will open things up to talk directly then. So Southwest Minnesota Arts Council, or SMAC, is a nonprofit organization committed to promoting and encouraging the development of the arts in the 18 counties of Southwest Minnesota by serving as a source of funds and technical services, which enable local organizations, educational institutions, and individuals to sponsor, create, and promote the arts in their communities. Here is our service region down in this corner. Those are the 18 counties we cover. We are one of 11 regional arts councils that cover the whole state of Minnesota. Our funding comes mostly from the state through an allocation from their general fund and also from the Arts and Cultural Heritage or Legacy funds. Other funding we have comes from the McKnight Foundation, and we use that for our grants for individual artists. And we also receive membership donations from individuals and organizations in our region. Some things that we are committed to include supporting artists and arts organizations in creating, producing, and presenting high-quality arts activities, overcoming barriers to accessing high-quality arts activities, instilling the arts into the community and public life, supporting high-quality, age-appropriate arts education for all ages to develop knowledge, skills, and understanding of the arts, and supporting events and activities that represent the diverse ethnic and cultural arts traditions of the region. So these are some things to keep in mind as you're thinking about your project. So even though you're looking at just purchasing some equipment or doing some improvements in your space, that all of that ultimately needs to relate back to these commitments. For this grant program, applicant organizations need to be located within the 18 counties of our service region, which are listed here, or on tribal lands within our service area. We acknowledge that our region occupies the traditional, ancestral, and contemporary lands of the Dakota people who have stewarded these lands throughout the generations. So the intent of this Equipment and Facilities Improvement Grant Program is to strengthen your organization's capacity to serve the arts needs of the region. And we're mainly looking at arts organizations as applicants for this program. And an arts organization is defined as an organization whose mission is focused primarily on the arts. We will accept requests from non-arts organizations if they can explain how those requests will be supporting community arts projects. So if you are a non-arts organization and have a request in mind, it's a good idea to talk with us beforehand to make sure that will be an eligible application. So here are a bunch of projects that you could do through this grant. Everything we're going to, in this list here, are things that we actually have funded requests for in the past. You can request sound and lighting equipment, things for your theater like curtains or risers. Then there's the whole area of structural improvements. If your bathrooms really need an update, need to repair an elevator or add one, If you need to do anything else for accessibility for your space, this is the place to request that. We've also had requests for different types of storage, like shelving units or even trailers. We've also had requests for instruments, for kilns or other studio equipment for art classes, and then things for the administration of your organization if you need computers, a printer, software, even down to chairs and tables and office furniture. So this is not an exhaustive list, but this is just an idea of the kinds of things that are covered under this grant program. If your organization does not own the space that you're using, you'll need to have an agreement with the facility owner saying how you are cooperating together. So it would need to outline how your organization will be able to access whatever this equipment or these improvements that you've added. So this would be things like who has keys to the space, who besides your organization is allowed to use whatever this equipment is, what happens if your organization moves to a different location. So those are all things to consider in that facility cooperative agreement. And there is a sample available within the application for you to take a look at. So these grants are available for up to $10,000. And this year, we are not requiring any match, which means that your organization will not need to put any money towards this project unless it costs more than the amount you can request. If your organization has received an operating support grant from us, you cannot include prorated general operating costs in the budget for this or any other grant from us. And we do have a limit on how much you can request over a 10-year period. You can receive up to $50,000 during a sliding 10-year time frame. Then we'll take a look at some eligibility things. This list includes things that are not eligible for these grants. Not eligible would be new construction or purchase of real estate. So you'd have to be working with existing facilities. Activities of a for-profit project or organization, projects that don't have an art focus, educational projects within a school system. Schools need to apply through our Arts in the Schools grant program and can only request equipment for a specific project. Also not eligible are activities that take place outside of Minnesota. Fundraising events, in other words, the grant should allow your project to break even, not to make a profit. Payments of debts incurred before the grant begins. Grant funds being used to match another SMOT grant or applicants with past due final reports. So that's just a quick overview of some of the most important things to be aware of for this grant program, but make sure to check the guidelines for this program and also our general grant guidelines for the full eligibility information. And we'll take a look at where you can find those a little later. So you'll need to choose a start date and end date for your project. We consider your project as having started as soon as you're ordering any supplies or equipment, paying any fees or contracts related to your project, or doing any advertising. So make sure to give yourself plenty of time from your start date to when activities related to your project are actually going to be happening, because you can't spend any funds before that project start date. If there's something that you just absolutely have to spend money on before that date, then you cannot include that cost in the grant project budget. You'll also need to choose an end date for your project, and all projects that are awarded this year must be finished up by June 30th, 2022. We actually are just having one deadline for this program this year. Normally we have two, one in the fall and one in the spring, but we have needed to delay some of our programs this fall as we were waiting to hear about funding. So the one round this year is February 10th deadline for projects that are starting April 1st or later. And also note that your application will need to be submitted by 4:30 p.m. on the deadline date. The system will not allow you to submit after that time. For your project, you're going to need to have two people, one, the project director, and that is whoever is most directly responsible for what's actually happening in the project. And then you'll also need to name an authorizing official, which would be the president or treasurer or someone else from your organization that has authorizing power. So these two roles cannot be the same person. You'll need to have two different people there, and both of them will need to sign the application, the contract, and the final report. If your organization doesn't have official 501c3 nonprofit status or is not a unit of government, which would be like a city or a county, you would need to find an organization that is one of those things to act as your fiscal sponsor. And this would be another agreement that you would need to have that would spell out the relationship between your organization and the fiscal sponsor organization. Again, there is a sample available within the application. Someone from that fiscal sponsor organization will need to sign your application contract and final report, and that organization will receive your grant funds, and they are legally responsible for the management of the funds and the completion of the project. And we'll stop for a moment to see if we've got any questions. So feel free to either type something in the chat or unmute yourself and ask a question.
Hi, this is Mary. I was just wondering if you can have more than one thing, like a list of things that you want to do in this.
Yes, you can kind of combine some needs into one grant request here. What were you
Okay.
hoping to combine?
Well, we want a new air conditioner,
Mm-hmm.
file cabinets. We have this idea for an art bike, which is like a bicycle with a mobile art studio thing.
Mm-hmm.
And what you've listed here gave me some new ideas like signage.
Yeah, so as long as it's included within um, the amount that you can request, you can definitely have a list of multiple things.
Okay, what about labor? Is that included?
Yeah, if there's labor to complete whatever the renovation is, that is eligible as well.
Okay, thanks.
Mm-hmm. Other questions?
This is Ricky Bly. If there's a grant going on with the Minnesota Historical Society Legacy Grant System, can the same agency or the same institution apply through this process?
It would probably have to be for a different project or a
Right.
different
I mean,
set of
yeah, it would
things.
be something different. I mean, a different goal.
But yeah, the only limitation would be if you were somehow getting money from both sources for a particular project, you'd have to have no more than 90% of the cost coming from state funds, which both of those would be. But if they're totally separate projects, that there's nothing you need to worry about there.
Okay, thanks.
Anything else at the moment? Not hearing anything, I think we will move on. We'll head over to our website here and show you a couple different places where you can get to our grant system. One is on our homepage. If you just scroll down beneath the slides here, there's this black grant box and it's got a login button right there. And then I'll show you another place we can get to that. These are all pages for the individual grant programs that we have. Here is our equipment and facilities. And you'll see there's an Apply Now button right here, which takes you to that same login. We'll just look at a few other things that are available for you here on the page for this grant. Here are all of your important dates to be aware of. The recording of this webinar will also be posted right here, probably by the end of this week if you need to refer back to it. We've got our guidelines for this program, along with our general grant guidelines that apply to all of our grant programs. So you'll want to take a look at both of those. We have application questions here that are in a Word document. So if you would like to work in that, write your draft within that Word document first and then paste into the grant system later, you're welcome to use that. You could take a look at the budget form, the criteria that the reviewers will be using to score your application. We also have the final report questions, again in a Word document that will give you a bit of an idea what to expect, what kinds of questions you're going to have to answer. And then finally, we've got a couple of tutorials for you here. The video tutorial is just a brief overview of getting started in the system, and then this PDF grant system guide goes into more detail. But we are going to go ahead and click Apply. You'll come to the login page. If you already have an account here, you can just log right in. If you are new to the system, you can create an account here. And if you're not sure whether you or someone else for your organization already has an account, please contact us and we can get that figured out for you. So I'm going to log in here. So when you log in, if you've already been working in the system before, you'll be brought to your applicant dashboard, and that lists everything that you've been working on here. But if you are new to the system, you'll be taken right away to this Apply page. This lists all of the grants that we have available right now. You'll just need to scroll through and find the one you are looking for. Here's our equipment and facilities improvement. If you want to just look at the application without actually starting anything, you can click this preview button. Otherwise, you can hit apply to start an application. I'm just going to point out a few buttons as you are starting an application here. Here we have this select language. This integrates Google Translate into this system, and it will translate the interface and questions into another language. If that is what will work for you, those are available there. Then we've got this copy previous answers button. This will be really handy if you have done an application in the system before. Once you click this, it will bring up a list of all of the applications that you've worked on previously, and you can choose one to copy answers over from. And it will copy over answers to any questions that are the same between both of those applications. Then we have our Collaborate button. And this enables someone else to be working on the application with you. And it's very easy to do. You enter in their email address, choose what level of permission you'd like to give to them. You can enter in a message here saying what it is you'd like them to do, if you want them to add some audience numbers or proofread for you. You can let them know what you want them to do, and just click this invite button. They'll receive an email, and if they don't already have an account in the system, it will just direct them to just creating a password. That's all they need to do, and then they'll be able to come in and work on the application. If you run into some questions or need some help, we've got a couple options for you. One, if you want to schedule some time with me to talk through something, you can just click here and And this will allow you to schedule some time on my calendar. You can choose how you want to meet. And then pick a day and time that works for you, and that will just schedule that meeting with me automatically. And my email address is also available here if you prefer to get questions answered that way. So the first thing you'll need to fill out is a name for your project. These can be very simple, just describing what it is that you're going to be doing. Here's where you'll enter the amount you're requesting. You'll probably want to wait until you filled out your budget form though to fill that in. We've got links to guidelines, application questions, scoring criteria here. And also a reminder that you will see that the character limit for the narrative fields is really quite large, and we're really not expecting you to come anywhere near using that up. We want to make sure there's enough space there if there's something that you really have a lot to say about, but again, we just appreciate concise answers. So no need to feel like you need to fill up those text boxes. Then you'll start out by describing your project. What equipment do you need to purchase, or what improvements are you planning to do? If you're working with someone on that project, why have you chosen them and what are their qualifications? Who from your organization is going to be involved? And then it asks you to detail your planning and your project schedule. Next, we've got an optional spot here if there are any supplemental materials that you think will help explain what it is that you're trying to do. If you need to include some photos of the space or a technical diagram of how things are going to be set up, or just some more information about the particular equipment that you're looking at buying, you've got 2 upload fields here to include some of that information if you'd like to. Then here is where you would enter in the facility cooperative agreement. And here's a sample of that. So here's just a sample of the kinds of things that this might include. It talks about who has keys, who owns the particular equipment that is stored on the site, what happens if your organization would move somewhere, who else has access to things. So you would fill that out, a signed agreement with the owner of your facility, and upload that here. Here are start and end dates for your project. Then we'll take a look at the budget form, and note you may want to open this in Adobe Reader to make sure that the PDF form formulas will calculate for you. So in your budget form, you can put in name of your project here. Then you've got some space to itemize everything, all of the costs that you have, space for equipment purchases, for labor, for other expenses. So you just type some items in there, enter some amounts. You'll see it's starting to total for you. So here it's got your total expenses listed. Then if your total expenses are more than the amount you can request, you would put any income that you have toward the project here. If it's from other donors or some of your own organization cash is being used, you would put that there. And then here you would enter how much you're requesting. So in this case, we would request $2,100. That was the amount that we put in above, and then our profit equals 0. So this is just a little double check for you here, and it gives you some options to try if for some reason this is not equaling 0 for you. So you would save that form to your computer and then upload it here. We've also got a budget narrative field. If there are some details that didn't fit into that budget to do some more explaining. And then if you have any one item or labor that is more than $500, we ask that you provide 2 different bids for that item. And there's some room to upload bids here. Our next section here is all about your organization, your mission statement, a brief history, what kinds of programs you have, who you're generally serving, and then some more detail about your programs, how you are making your artistic choices, making sure the artists you're hiring have an appropriate level of experience, and that your projects really enable the participants to develop their knowledge, skills, and understanding of the arts. Then we've got a couple of questions about your board, the kind of support you're getting from the community, what kinds of collaborations you have with other organizations. Then we ask you to think about the underserved in your community, describing the groups in your community that are underserved or underrepresented in the arts, which could be defined by race or ethnicity, socioeconomic level, ability, etc. And then you would talk about what you generally do to reach out to or involve one or more of those groups so that they can participate in your projects. It's got some examples here. And then finally, specifically drilling down into ADA access, do you have an access plan, and how do you ensure that your projects are accessible to those with disabilities? Then we ask you for some general financial information, a beginning balance, income, expenses, and ending balance for your most recently completed year. And you've got a narrative field here to add any explanation you'd like to that. Then we talk about the impact that this equipment or facilities project will have on your organization. How will it strengthen your ability to provide these activities that you provide? What specific programs or events will benefit? And how are you kind of challenging and stretching your organization while being rooted in your mission? Then we've got your outcome evaluation plan. You are asked to choose 1 to 3 of the Minnesota Arts outcomes. We'll follow this link in a minute. And we suggest that you choose number 3 or number 7 as your main outcome. So if we go look at that, there are some different areas of arts outcomes. Number 3 is the capacity of those providing arts experiences is increased or strengthened, and enriches the ways they connect to their communities through the arts. And number 7, the arts grow in reach and impact through programs and strategies that improve the health and operations of regional arts organizations. So those are 2 very broad, high-level outcomes. So you can choose either one of those as your main goal. So you'd enter those numbers in here. And then we take those high-level outcomes and then think about, for your situation specifically, what will change as a result of your project, and then how will you measure or prove that that outcome has taken place. So we've got a sample sheet here for you. So here we've got a sample project. The theater group will purchase and install a new lighting system, and they chose number 3. Then they had kind of 2 parts of the same outcome there. One is related to the director and lighting crew. So they say what will change is that the lighting crew will have greater creativity possible in their lighting design with quicker setup, improved safety, and decreased energy usage. So that's what they say will change. In order to measure that, they say the project director will meet with the lighting crew and director to hear about the changes they noticed using it, and they will also compare an energy usage audit of the new system with one from the old system. And then it asks what will you then look for in that data you gathered that would indicate achievement. So in those conversations to meet the outcomes, the answers would be saying that there were improvements in setup and safety and creativity and energy usage. So then their other outcome here focuses more on what the audience is gaining through that, and they're extending their time period of their grant to include at least one activity so people can experience what the new equipment and provide feedback on that. And then down at the bottom here is just translating how these boxes would fit into the text box in the application. We have a blank worksheet here if you'd like to use that to work through coming up with your own outcomes and measurements. And if you are planning to use an evaluation tool as part of that, you can upload that here. We've got some audience numbers. You may not have a lot of audience numbers if you are just working on some improvements, but if you do include in that time period time for some activity to take place, you could put those audience numbers in there. Then we've got a quick section on some data we need to collect. This stuff does not have any bearing on your application, but is just some information that we pass on to the state. So for these where it says view codes, you would just click that link and choose whatever code best fits you and enter that here. Then we're asking some other audience numbers. These are annual audience served as opposed to above those specifically served by this project. And then it's just a section for some contact information, your project director, authorizing official. We ask who the grant writer is in case we have questions and need to contact you. Then if you are using a fiscal sponsor and click yes here, that section will appear for you. And you can enter their information. Here's a sample available here of what a fiscal sponsor agreement may look like. Then you'll need to attach your 501c3 status letter from the IRS. If you are using a fiscal sponsor, you would attach their letter here. And finally, at the bottom, we've got our signatures. So you would just type in your name as your signature, and this is a good place to use that collaborate button to say, have your fiscal sponsor come in and sign. So here are buttons at the bottom to save your application or submit. It does also auto save while you're working, but we're gonna click save for now. And you'll see it gives you a list of all of the questions that you still have left to answer. They are all here now since we did not fill anything in. If you want to keep working, you would click continue here, but we're gonna head back to our dashboard. So here now is the application that we just started. If you are returning and want to keep working on that, here's the edit application button. And then this is the same place you'll come back to if you need to fill out a contract or final report for that request. And we're gonna head back over to our slides and stop for a brief moment if there are any other questions at this point. I'm not hearing any questions, so I'm going to move on. We'll just look at some tips for you as you are starting to work on your application. It's a good idea to start early so you have time to gather all the different pieces you need if you're going to need your bids and to be able to have costs of things. And like we mentioned a couple times before, make sure to read the guidelines carefully so that you're not missing anything. You noticed in the application that a lot of the questions have more than one part to them. So make sure that you are addressing all of those little parts within your answer. And we also talked about keeping your answers really clear and concise. And there's no need to use any special kind of writing for this grant application. Just everyday language will be great. Also good to assume that the grant reviewers don't know anything about your organization and your project. They are instructed to just base their scores on what is in the application. So it's a good thing to think about. If I didn't know anything about our organization, what would I need to have here to make sure people know what's going on? And finally, it's a good idea to have someone proofread your application. There are several ways that you can get some assistance with this. First, you can give us a call to talk about your project before you're even starting an application, just to make sure you're starting under the right grant program, that your project is eligible, things like that. You can also contact us with questions anytime as you're working on your application. And finally, we can actually review your application for you before you submit it. If you let us know up to about 2 weeks before the deadline, we can guarantee that we're able to look at it. After that time, we'll probably be able to take a look, but we don't guarantee that. So what happens after you submit your application? We as staff here will review your application for eligibility and completeness, make sure you have everything. And if at that point we find that there's an attachment missing or something else that needs to be updated for your eligibility, we will contact you and you'll have 48 hours to remedy that. And then after that point, that's kind of the staff's last point of contact with that application. We don't have any say over what gets funded or not. So those applications will get passed on to a panel of individuals from around our region, and they will discuss and score those applications based on the criteria for this program, which we'll take a look at in a minute. And then finally, the applications will all go on to our full SMOC board of directors, who will make the final funding decisions based on the recommendations from that grant review panel. So for the equipment and facilities grants, what they will be scoring you on are the feasibility of your project, worth 5 points, the merit of your organization and the artistic quality of your programs, worth 11 points, and the impact that the project will have on your organization, worth 18 points. And if you look at that attachment that we pointed out earlier that has the scoring criteria, it'll go into more details under each of these criteria, so you can have a better idea of what they are looking for. In addition to those criteria, applicants will also be awarded one additional percentage point for each of these following criteria if they are a first-time applicant to SMOC, if their organization is led by or primarily serving BIPOC or LGBTQIA communities or people with disabilities, or if they are located in a county that has received 3 or fewer grants from us in the last fiscal year. If your grant is awarded, you'll need to complete an online contract. Then after you complete that, you'll receive 80% of your grant award by the time of your start date. Then you'll receive the remaining 20% of your grant award after you've finished your project and your final report. You'll need to acknowledge the grant on any publicity that you have related to your project. There will be a credit line that will give you that you'll need to include. You may also need to include this Minnesota Legacy logo depending on what funds you have been awarded. And all of that will be sent to you and are also available on our website. So you don't have to worry about making sure you have the right information to include. You'll need to complete a final report within 60 days after your project end date. And it's a good idea to take a look through that report when you first start your project, so you know what kind of information you'll need to gather. If you need attendance numbers or costs or outcomes, just to give you an idea of what you'll need to report on. And we also expect that you're going to spend what you proposed in your budget. So after you're awarded a grant, that is not the time to then start looking at where you can save money. We really need you to spend that full amount. And if it looks like your expenses are going to need to change, let us know and we can get those changes approved in advance. I just want to talk about some other opportunities that we have coming up. Our next webinar that may be of interest to you is for our Art Legacy Project and Art Legacy Project Planning grants. And that webinar will be on January 21st from noon to 1. Then we still have some funds remaining in our Going Virtual grants, which are some quick $1,000 grants to help arts organizations with being able to do virtual programming at this time. And we will have for sure one more deadline coming up on February 1st. Then just a couple other things. We have grant support open hours the second Tuesday of the month from 11 to 1. The next day coming up for that will be January 12th. They are virtual at the moment still, so you'll just log in and can chat about anything that you have questions about during that time. Then we also have been having conversations for arts organizations and for artists monthly for the last several months. Coming up, we're actually having a combined session for January on the 19th at 2:30 p.m. And that will feature the artists from Granite Falls who are working on the City Artists in Residence project. So you'll get to hear both from the artists that they have hired and from the program developers. So both perspectives there. Then here's just our contact information. Email is still the best way to get hold of us these days. And that is it for our presentation today. So I will just open things up again if you have anything that you'd like to talk about.
Carol and Mark Gleesner from the Cultural Center in Bird Island.
Hi.
Hi. We're looking at the facility here with one project. When we did that mural project, we insulated the western wall. It's a concrete block wall, so we insulated it and then put a surface on there for that mural. Looking at doing this, at least insulating and stuccoing the east side wall in the alley, and then doing some work on the windows are really deteriorating, and wondering in one window area, thinking about an air filtration system. Have any facilities been looking at those kinds of things to filter that air that
I
you're aware of?
am not aware of anyone that has done that so far, but that
Okay,
doesn't mean you couldn't do that.
okay. I was just curious if any effort's been done or what kinds of things are out there. So, but we can research that. I was just wondering. So, okay. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Hi, this is Ricky Bly again.
Hi.
I just made note of the fact that you talked about there was still some money left for hosting virtual meetings. That can you tell me a little more about that?
Sure, that actually is just for arts organizations, but it is for any equipment that they might need in order to be able to do that, or software, or if they need some consulting to help them get started with being able to do virtual programming.
So what would be the qualifications to be an art organization? We work with the Dana Boyd Folk School in Tyler.
We kind of define an arts organization as your mission being primarily focused on the arts. So
Okay.
that's probably borderline there for you guys. I think it would really come down to what your organization's mission actually is. And if you want, that's something that you could just send us an email about. Any other questions today? If not, we will wrap up. Thanks for joining us today, and we hope to hear from you.